Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it is time for your latest edition of the Live Mic. I am, of course, your host, Michael Beck, deputy editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. And it is my pleasure, as always, to be hanging out with you guys today. A little bit earlier than normal, but we get to kick off a great weekend a little bit earlier than usual. So it's great to be here hanging out with you guys. Of course, we got a little bit of Steelers news coming down the pipeline. It broke yesterday a little bit, that being the signing of Ray McDonald, I believe the last name was. Excuse me if I'm wrong there, but the Steelers bringing in the new wide receiver. And today's news, Ray McLeod, there it is. It popped into my mind. But the Steelers had to cut Saeed Blacknall, the former XFL wide receiver. I think someone a lot of us kind of figured would push to make one of the final roster spots. So that was a bit of an interesting move there. Obviously not being able to attend training camp, we haven't been able to see how Saeed has performed, but considering he's already been cut in favor of this new receiver, Ray McLeod, the Steelers definitely kind of tipped their hand, I guess, to how he was performing, that they wanted to bring someone else in. Ray McLeod, of course, is a big-time speed threat. He went to Clemson, college teammate of Deion Kane, another Steelers receiver. I believe he had stops in Buffalo. I want to say one other stop before he got to Pittsburgh, but Ray McLeod is your newest Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver. Whether or not he makes a team, I guess we'll have to find out, but he'll have to make a pretty big impact fairly quickly and with no preseason games if he wants to make that team. So good luck to him, because if he makes his team, it only makes us better. Before we get really into our topic today, I just wanted to mention that we are doing a new little thing on our Twitter site and all over our social media world on Fridays, our Follow Fridays. Today we're spotlighting co-editor Dave Schofield. Make sure to give him a follow on Twitter. He's always talking about great Steelers stuff, and he keeps his Steelers. He doesn't stray to other sports or nothing like that. It's all Steelers all the time. And while you're at it, make sure you're following Behind the Steel Curtain itself. Our pages on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We have great contests coming out, fresh content on all of our pages as well. And you'll always be able to catch all our stories the second they drop, including breaking news and reaction to that as soon as it pops up. That being said, let's get right into some of the biggest factors for the 2020 season for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm not going to touch on really the biggest one here, that being the health of Ben Roethlisberger, because it has been talked about ad nauseum. Just it is really what it is. If Ben can't go, I don't know if the Steelers team is still a Super Bowl favorite unless they were to find a quarterback out of seemingly nowhere. But we can really kind of focus today on those other big-time factors. I think we all know how important it is to keep our starting quarterback healthy, especially of what we saw a year ago. So the first one I really want to talk about, too, is health-related, and that's the general health of this overall team. If T.J. Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, and Devin Bush were to go down with injuries, I'm sure this defense wouldn't be this legendary unit that we're kind of expecting it to be. Of course, those guys haven't really faced injury bug so far in their careers. I believe TJ's only missed one game, that in week 3 of his rookie season, either week 2 or week 3. Minkah, I don't believe he's missed a game yet in his career. Same with Devin Bush. Those guys I'm not super worried about. It's the guys that seem to keep kind of running into that injury wall. Of course, James Conner's the first name that comes to mind, but it's easy to rip on him. But the fact of the matter is, running backs, it's a position where you get hit a lot, and you're definitely going to see injuries to that position. It's not just the Steelers that get hit by this. It's every team in the NFL. I wouldn't expect anyone but wouldn't really expect one player on the Steelers backfield to really make it through the entire season with a complete bill of health. It's just the nature of the position. Those guys get beat up, they get twisted up, they get guys fall on them. It's really one of the more thankless positions in today's day and age of football. They're still kind of expected to carry a pretty big workload, but guys like James Conner, if he can play a full season, He was a Pro Bowler on, I believe it was 12 or 13 games in 2018, nearly 1,000-yard rusher, but of course he missed out on that because of injury. And it's something that's pretty much affected every single season that he's played so far, all 3 years. I believe he's had a knee surgery, of course, the elbow issues, or shoulder issues rather, last year. And I want to say ankle stuff the year prior to that. James Conner, it's really unfortunate how unlucky he's been over the course of his 3 seasons so far in the NFL. But again, that is the nature of the position. One other name that really kind of jumps off the page there is Juju Smith-Schuster and his health, because obviously his numbers took a huge downward spike a year ago. But that's definitely has more to do with him not being healthy for most of the season. And couple that with the quarterback play of Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges. No real slam to those guys, but they're not Ben Roethlisberger, and they didn't have the chemistry. They threw almost 0 passes to Juju in that preseason, so it's kind of hard to blame Juju's numbers on him. Really, there's a ton of outside factors. If he could play a healthy 16 games with Ben Roethlisberger, I'm sure he'll bounce back to being a 1,000-yard receiver and get back in the good graces of Steelers Nation. But who knows, if Juju Smith-Schuster puts up 1,200, 1,300, 1,400 yards again, he might price himself off this team. So if that's the case, you know what? I think we'll gladly all take a 1,400-yard year out of Juju Smith-Schuster. I think that would scream that this team is extraordinarily good. So I think we'll all take that, even if it ended in an inevitable loss of Juju. If he could help take us to the promised land, it's one of those things like, you can't really blame someone for getting $5 million more somewhere else. You know, if you worked at Costco for $15 an hour and Walmart called you and said, we'll pay you $17, you'll probably switch over. And that's what it is in the NFL. And I'm someone who's kind of learned not to punish those guys too much if they sign elsewhere. But the health of the unit is extremely important. The O-line, receivers, Ben, obviously, running back, like, there isn't too many positions that this team has that is absolutely loaded with depth. So it is extremely crucial that some of these guys can stay healthy, or that the Steelers can just kind of juggle how they use their guys. You know, outside linebacker, there's a ton of depth. Corner, there's a ton of depth. But of course, the guys at the top are some of the best in the NFL, and you really don't want to be losing those big time game breakers. So the overall depth of this team, health rather, of this team is, year in and year out, will be the most important factor in any given season. Moving on to the next real talking point here is the creativity of the offense. Something we kind of saw a lot last year out of the Steelers offense was a propensity to be a little bit stale, and that probably has a lot to do with who's playing quarterback and how they wanted to simplify the offense. But the lack of play action, the lack of movement, I think that really stemmed the hiring of Matt Canada, also to help develop these quarterbacks that they have behind Ben Roethlisberger, of course, not having a QB coach since Randy Fichtner took over the reins as offensive coordinator. So I think it should be one of those things where this team really needs to focus on making this offense a little bit more dynamic, not being so obvious, the run, pass kind of style. At times, it just, you could see it on the couch. You're screaming out. You could see the formation. They put Zach Banner on the field. Of course, it's a ton of fun when Mr. 72 is eligible, comes out on the field. However, you knew that about 95% of the time that would be a run play. So that's one of the biggest things I think the Steelers coaching staff needs to kind of focus on a bit here, is that they really need to change it up a little bit when it comes to their play calling, especially in the offensive side of the ball. With Ben Roethlisberger back, of course, stuff are going to change. He likes to call his own stuff from time to time, and Fichtner is a Ben Roethlisberger guy. That there's a reason why he has that job, and Ben Roethlisberger likes having him there. So maybe a little bit more offensive autonomy for Ben Roethlisberger. So he might alone kind of force this offense hand and being a little bit more creative, working the ball downfield a little bit more, not just forcing deep throws like we saw sometimes with Johnny Holton running down the sideline. You know, sometimes sometimes you could even see the play coming, 1st and 10, just sling the ball downfield in a desperate prayer to back the safeties up, even though you knew they weren't going to last year. The boxes were going to be stacked regardless. They just didn't respect that long ball game. And when Johnny Holton was running those routes, he wasn't catching the passes. So it's hard to blame them. But offensive creativity is going to be huge, and more so than just a wildcat now and then, especially when you're running a wildcat that ends in interceptions and fumbles. So that was a bit like the most creative. I think we saw the Steelers a year ago was when they were running that stuff, but it just didn't work. After a while, teams kind of caught on, and they really kind of forced the Steelers away from that one little niche that they had in their offense that teams had a game plan for. But I think when you look at the offensive additions of Chase Claypool and Eric Ebron, 2 humongous receiving targets, I think it almost forces the offense in itself to be a little bit more creative, because it's going to be a mismatch nightmare for opposing teams. And it's really going to be one of those things that the opponents of the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2020 are just going to have to really kind of figure out who they're going to pick their poison for. You know, there's so many names in this offense that have potential to break out that I think when it comes to offensive creativity, the proof is almost in the pudding, just because of what everyone's able to do. You got the guys that can take the top off the defense. You got the guys that can sit over the middle and in Vance McDonald and Eric Ebron run those intermediate routes and just be big bodies, box out guys. And of course, the newest addition of Chase Claypool, he's got a ton of speed. Ray McLeod, if he makes his team, he's probably the fastest wide receiver on the organization right now. So there are guys there that allows this offense to do stuff a whole lot differently than they did a year ago. It's definitely much more improved, and they can run plays to the strengths of their offensive players. Moving on to our next point here, continuing with the offensive side of the ball. It's one of the things that the 2019 Steelers kind of struggled a lot with, and that was starting games fast. No offensive touchdowns, I believe, to start any of their drives in 2019. And that's one of the things that the Steelers really struggled with, obviously, and it's a really big factor because teams play different when they're playing from behind or playing with the lead, or when they're playing a tied game, especially when you're kicking things off right off the top. So scoring right away is super important. We saw how Baltimore was able to pretty much dominate the entire NFL up until their unfortunate. It really wasn't unfortunate. Their playoff demise in that first game for them. When they dropped out, they kind of got away from something that was exactly what the Steelers needed to do, and that's starting so fast that you build up a 7, 10, 14-point lead before the other team really has their second drive. If you're able to score touchdowns that quickly, you almost eliminate the other team's running attack, because then the clock starts running and both teams can start running the ball. And if that's what that came down to, that 14-point lead could really shred away the opposing teams. So starting games faster, I think that's one of the most important factors here. Just if it doesn't get better, it's not the end of the world. But if the Steelers can start playing with leads, they can really kind of get their backfield more into games. They can look for play calls to be found in other non-traditional senses. At times, it really was one of the more frustrating things, I'd say, as a Steelers fan a year ago, is knowing whenever this team marched out on the field, the defense would be thrown out there right away. And that brings me to my next point, and that's sustaining drives, continuing with the offensive side of the ball. Ben Roethlisberger coming back is going to do this, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is just a complete non-issue. But a year ago, Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges, especially Mason Rudolph, he would string together some pretty rough drives every now and then, and he'd follow that up by 2 or 3 more rough drives. And then when that happens, 3-and-out city, and the defense just keeps going back out on the field, again and again and again and again, really just kind of wearing them down. And it was something that it didn't matter how great the Steelers defense was, because they're always out on the field so much. Eventually they're going to give up that long drive because they're just freaking exhausted. So Steelers offense needs to give their defense some rest. They need to get some first downs, and they can do this, and they totally will. I have full belief that the Steelers offense will move a whole lot better now with Ben Roethlisberger back in the lineup. But you could see it a year ago. Of course, Minkah Fitzpatrick's turning balls over. Joe Hayden with his 5 interceptions. TJ Watt punching out 8 fumbles. The defense was doing their job, but the second the offense gets on the field, if the defense didn't take it in the house, it could go 3 and out and be right back on the field and almost negate that great play. So that's something that, if is cleaned up, it really kind of takes this organization from just a AFC North hopeful to a Super Bowl team. You know, if this offense can extend drives, and if they can start fast, if they can have 14 points before the end of the first quarter, even 10 points before the end of the first, and they can really kind of figure out their rushing attack and be a little more conservative with the ball once they kind of built up a lead of 10 or so points, their defense can kind of take over those games, just force the turnovers. The offense can chew the clock down, pick up a first down or two each and every drive. All of a sudden, Steelers are winning the game by two scores. You got 2 minutes left, and for once, us Steelers fans aren't sweating, which would be extremely nice. A nice change of pace, not to be down by 2 and driving, but it makes for some good memories. But every now and then, I don't mind a blowout or two here. Like, I don't know if you guys remember that Carolina Panthers game from 2018, but when the Steelers kind of blew the barn doors off the Panthers, I just remember loving that game, not being nervous at all in the fourth quarter, and it just made for some good television. watching the boys in black and gold just take over a game. And if there's more than 2019 or 2020 rather, I think we would all be all right with that. The close games are fun, especially to look back on in memory, but it keeps the hair from going gray, I would say. Moving into our next point here, before we kind of transition into more of that kind of defensive side, and we'll kick things off with the offensive rookies. We'll touch on the defensive rookies in part 2, but this season, obviously, there's been a lot of extenuating factors that these guys really couldn't control, obviously, with COVID-19 shutting down mini camps, rookie camps, OTAs. There's a ton of factors weighing against our 2020 rookie class. The guy right at the top right now, Chase Claypool, is getting a ton of praise. I don't know how much you guys have noticed this, but online and in the media and the Steelers team itself, there's guys every single day talking about him making a play, a back shoulder catch. Joe Hayden even mentioned he took a rep against Chase Claypool, and he had good position on him, but Chase just jumped over him, literally jumped over top of him, ripping the ball out of his hands. And that getting plays like that out of a rookie would completely change this season, because there's going to be a lot of rookies that struggle a whole lot more to understand the playbook, understand kind of what's going on in this in their systems. Namely because they didn't have the time on the field that most guys normally get. You typically do see those slow starts out of rookies. But this year, I think we're going to see a whole lot more of that, just because they haven't had time in the playbook. And that's something I could see be a little bit of a frustrating thing for some of these guys, especially the quarterbacks, especially guys that are going to get thrown to the fire. I think someone like Tua Tagovailoa is going to be all right, because they still have Ryan Fitzpatrick they can roll out there and just say, hey, man, like, we're just going to let you learn the offense, and it's going to be okay. A guy like Joe Burrow, who the Bengals just said, whatever, we'll cut Andy Dalton. We don't need him. We have all the cap in the world, but we're going to cut this guy and just throw Broadway Joe Burrow out on the field and hope we don't destroy his confidence. But that totally could be something that we see out of him and see out of a ton more rookies. A guy like Chase Claypool is interesting because he doesn't need to be anything more than the fourth wide receiver. But if he's as good as everyone in camp is talking about, then you're going to start to see the Steelers win more and more games with the more and more production they get out of the rookies, because there's going to be a ton of teams that just simply don't get any production at all out of their rookies. They're not going to know how to use them properly. the biggest factor for Chase, obviously, is getting his chemistry right with one Benjamin Todd Roethlisberger. If he's able to do that, and Ben starts to trust him, we see it all the time. The first name I can think of is Mike Wallace in his rookie season, just over 900 yards. Starting things off, Mike didn't get a ton of targets when he was starting his rookie season, but as his relationship with Ben developed, and he got a ball, he caught it. He got a deep ball, he caught it. He got an intermediate ball, he got it. He got that home run shot. He takes it 80 yards for a touchdown. All of a sudden, we see this all the time with Ben Roethlisberger. Once he kind of gets in a groove with a certain wide receiver, especially rookies, or any new guy for the team, on the team for that matter, once that kind of happens, they start getting the ball more and more and more, and it just snowballs until this guy's getting a ton of targets. So if Chase is able to step on the field, say week 1 against the Giants, he hauls in 3 catches, which I think would be a completely outstanding number considering everything that's going on. If he gets 3 targets and comes down to 3 catches, I think we'd be on the precipice, the doorstep of an amazing rookie season, because Ben's only going to give him the ball more and more if he can pull in a stat line like that, especially kicking things right off the top. So one of those huge factors is how the rookies can figure it out with, especially with guys that have to work so closely with one Ben Roethlisberger. Kicking things back to our next rookie there, of course, Mr. Dotson, offensive guard. He suffered a knee injury that we just recently found out is going to be nothing serious, no ligament damage, no need for surgery. But Dotson, he's going to miss some time in training camp, and that right there is going to be really interesting to me. I never projected him to get much, if any, playing time this year. Specifically, just kind of more so to do with the depth than with him as a player. There's nothing wrong with Dotson, but he is not going to get training camp. He's not getting any preseason games, no OTAs, mini camp, rookie camp. They're not going to throw this guy to the fire. If there's injuries and he's completely healthy at like week 10, potentially he could get some playing time. But even then, I feel like the Steelers would try to give this guy every opportunity to learn they possibly could. So Dotson's not the big X factor that Chase Claypool is, but he is still someone that the Steelers obviously have a ton of future plans in. The other name that will be a giant X factor here is one Mr. Anthony Mcfarland Jr. Anthony is an interesting player here because he is someone that's going to take a ton of snaps. I think in the return game, as mostly a kick returner. I think Deontay Johnson, of course, being an all-pro as a punt returner, will still get his shots back there unless those fumbling woes kind of continue. But he's someone who's going to see a ton of snaps in the return game. He's going to be someone that sees a ton of snaps in the slot. And I think that's because of his relationship with Matt Canada and how he can motion around that offense. And if he's someone that can come in day one and start clicking with this team, start kind of taking some of those reps off the plate of James Conner, a few less hits for him, he can get involved in the passing game, catch a couple screen passes. If he's someone that can contribute and say averages, I don't know, like 5 to 10 touches a game, which would be outstanding for a 4th round pick running back here. I think that could kind of sway how things work out for this team. Mcfarland, it's going to be interesting how the Steelers platoon their running backs, but that's going to be one of the big factors here is if they're able to roll 3 or 4 guys, depending on how many they keep, the more likely each and every one of them is going to be healthy and available for each following week. So Anthony Mcfarland, if he can provide some sort of depth stability and someone that can take some snaps in the passing game, in that motion game, and as a kick returner, the more he plays, the better he's going to make this team. So I think between him and Chase Claypool, if they can step up and make contributions in year one, that would be absolutely outstanding because there's going to be so many teams that aren't going to get a whole lot from anyone. Before we move into part 2 here, for those of you listening on our podcast platform, I just want to again reiterate, make sure it's Follow Friday. BTSC co-editor Dave Schofield on Twitter is our follow Friday of the day. So make sure you go check him out and his great Steelers stuff. And make sure you're always checking in on Behind the Steel Curtain on our website and our Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook social media platforms. So moving into part two, before we even get there, I just want to say we will be touching on some of the depth along the defensive side, a little bit of special team stuff, and more rookie talk. So if you're listening on the podcast side, make sure to tune over just about now. And again, I'm Michael Beck, deputy editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Now, part two of our biggest factors for the Pittsburgh Steelers 2020 season. We're going to continue along with that rookie talk on the defensive side. Again, if you're just tuning in, I am BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, deputy editor Michael Beck, also running the social media for the website and interacting with each and every one of you on that platform every day. So keep those tweets, comments, and mentions going. It's fun. It's fun getting to work with each and every one of you. But if we can dive right back into our topic here today, and just continue with our rookie talk, but now with our defensive rookie X factors. Obviously, the biggest one here, and potentially the only one who can see some sort of playing time and contributions as a rookie is one Mr. Alex Highsmith. What's going to be interesting here, though, is how much playing time he really gets, because of course, the Steelers training camp, we've been hearing tons and tons about Ola Adeni and how he's kind of taken a step forward and projects to kind of be that third outside linebacker in the rotation. So if that's the case, and that makes Alex Highsmith the fourth outside linebacker at best on this depth chart. And there's still Tuzar Skipper, who's got some years on him already in the NFL, that could potentially even be ahead of him just because of his youth. And the Steelers might just be keen to let him have a redshirt year of sorts, play on special teams. But he is someone that I think will still get some snaps because of his pass rushing prowess. Something we saw a lot a year ago when TJ Watt or Bud Dupree needed to hang out on the sideline just to get a little bit of a rest from those long drives that they're kind of forced to play through because the offense was turning the ball over so quickly, is when Anthony Chickillo was on the field as the third pass rusher. He struggled. He wasn't getting the quarterback or providing any pressure at anything towards him at all there. But so, and by him, I mean the quarterback, excuse me. But when Alex Highsmith enters this team, he's going to probably see a little bit more of those pass rushing scenario snaps, namely because he was so good at Charlotte as a pass rusher. He was, I believe, third in the entire NCAA as a pass rusher, getting sacks, which is freaking insane considering the school that he went to and how they're in the D1 level. Everyone knew that he was taking those primetime matchups. He was facing the double teams week in and out, but he's still able to put up over 15 sacks, which is pretty insane over the course of a 12-game college season, playing at Charlotte, going up against teams like Clemson. And of course, I've mentioned it before in the show, Dabo Swinney giving him props, singling him out on that Charlotte team when they played one another a year ago, how much of a game wrecker he was on the outside. As Snowman says on the live chat, Highsmith will replace Bud Dupree next year. I completely agree. I think that's something that's just going to happen based on Bud Dupree pricing himself out and then moving himself up the lineup. The Steelers have been proactive, I think, in some of the losses they're kind of expecting to see in 2021. Alex Highsmith obviously being kind of the top name there. So for him not to get any pass rushing snaps this year, I think would be a shame because you kind of got to see what you got in him. And throwing him to the Wolves next year on week one after like a season not giving it any snaps would be a mistake. So giving Alex Highsmith some snaps here, and if he can make any sort of an impact, if he could chip in with 3 sacks, 4 sacks, that's more than Chickillo was put up a year ago. I think that's something that would be super, super important to see go down. But I can't really see a Highsmith making too much of an impact just because TJ Watt's going to command so many snaps. Bud Dupree is getting paid crazy amount of money, and you're not just going to sit him on the sideline to see what you got in your guy from next year. So don't expect too much from Highsmith, but if he's able to contribute, that would only bode so well for this defense, because then it allows guys like TJ and Bud to take a rest every now and then. And you're not going to skip a beat and still be getting after the quarterback with Highsmith out on the field. And we can only hope that that is something that happens. So moving kind of on to our next kind of talking point here and impacts, and that's going to be the depth of our inside linebackers and safeties. Obviously, when it comes to inside linebacker, I think there's a little more kind of thinness, I suppose, to the position, because outside of Vince Williams and Devin Bush, there really isn't a whole lot there, especially with guys that have snaps in the NFL. Ulysses Gilbert is well atop that list of depth at inside linebacker, but he never really played last year, especially getting any inside linebacker snaps. The guy below him, and someone I believe will thoroughly make this team, is Robert Spelaine. He was a difference maker in special teams, and he will absolutely deserves a spot on this team to do it again in 2020, just because of how good he was. We don't know what he can do on the defensive side of the ball, though, as a linebacker. So if he's your number 4, your number 3 is Ulysses Gilbert. The Steelers obviously didn't draft anyone. They didn't sign anyone. So he is going to have a ton on his plate and a fair bit of pressure, I would say, namely because we don't really know what we still have left in Vince Williams, especially in the passing game, because at times he could be, I hate to say someone that teams would pick on, but when he's out there, he's more of a weaker link in the defense. If teams just have the right personnel out there and he has to go one-on-one with the slot or a tight end, typically that's where quarterbacks go on the opposing team, is wherever Vince Williams is. He's a beast in the run game. But you don't want to have Vince out there in 3rd and 12, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 6 on those definite passing downs, because that's where teams are going to look. They're going to run slants over top of him if he's in zone coverage, and if he's lined up in some sort of one-on-one matchup, teams are going to try to abuse that kind of spot there. And the only thing that is kind of in the way of the Steelers having no one is this kind of unknown in Ulysses Gilbert III. He is someone who is definitely highly thought of by the organization because they didn't bring in that extra linebacker this offseason. So UG3 is going to be a really, really, really big factor. If he can step on the field and produce a lot on 3rd downs, he might start to eat away at some of Vince Williams' snaps on 2nd and 1st down, which I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with. It might hurt the running game at first, but I think Ulysses is someone the Steelers probably should look at getting more and more reps, and someone that if they do think is highly of, I think he will eventually take over that starting inside linebacker spot, especially as Vince Williams continues to age. Before we keep going on here with our safety depth, Snowman, thank you for throwing a $2 in with the super chat feature. He says, hit the like button, folks, please. I couldn't agree with that more. Like the show, comment. And if you're listening on our podcast platform, make sure to give us those 5 stars. Leave a comment. It only helps us and helps us bring you more exciting and more great Steelers talk each and every week. So by all means, hit that like button, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Make sure you're telling your other Steelers buddies that we're doing this pretty much each and every day. As a matter of fact, we are doing this each and every day. So make sure you just keep tuning in and coming back. So Snowman, again, thank you for throwing a $2 into the tip jar there. Moving things back along with our safety depth. This is where things get a little more interesting, because after Minkah Fitzpatrick and Terrell Edmunds, of course, both first rounders, there isn't a whole lot. Jordan Dangerfield, of course, is someone that's going to make this team once again, as a special teamer, but he hasn't taken too many snaps over the course of his career at safety. And if he's the guy that's hanging out in that kind of deep third, I think teams, again, would be looking at that matchup and saying, we're throwing the ball down there. But the Steelers did make some moves this offseason, and one fairly recently to kind of shore up that defensive backfield. Obviously, they just signed Curtis Riley. He's a cornerback / safety, which is an interesting designation because he has played both. I think he's going to contribute probably as both, because as someone who, if he does make this team, would probably be the fourth safety on the roster. He would definitely have to play a little bit on both sides there, especially in special teams as well. Riley, of course, he put up a ton of interceptions actually in 2018 before taking a step back a year ago. So it's going to be interesting to see really what the Steelers are getting out of him, if he's going to be the missed tackler that they kind of had last year, or if he's going to be someone that puts up those interception numbers in the passing game. But I'm not too sure what we're getting with Curtis Riley. And if that's the depth option the Steelers are going to go with, then hopefully we get a little bit more 2018 than we do 2019 out of him. Of course, the other name they brought in, they drafted Antoine Brooks Jr. out of Maryland. I believe a sixth or one of two. No, he was a 6th-round pick at 198th overall, as a matter of fact. Antoine Brooks, that's going to be another interesting name, I think, to see what he can potentially bring to this team. Typically, 6th-rounders are guys that might not even be making this team. Of course, the Steelers a year ago, I believe Sutton Smith was their 6th-round pick, the outside linebacker / fullback, which was a bit of an interesting mix of players. He was cut and didn't see the regular season. I think dating back before that, there was that long snapper. That name escapes me because he was beat out in training camp by Steelers' current long snapper, Cameron Canaday. So it's the 6th-round pick is a bit of throwing a dart at a dartboard sometimes. I guess we won't be able to know what we got in this guy, which pains me to say this because there is no preseason. We're really going to have to wait until week 1, really, if he even makes the team, to see what we got out of this guy. The Steelers coaches, obviously, you're going to see him in practice each and every day, but us as fans and as us as bloggers, we really don't get too much access to this very interesting, weird training camp that is 2020. Another name in that safety room is Marcus Allen, who I think is slowly falling out of favor here, who probably doesn't make this team, in all honesty. I don't think the Steelers are bringing other guys in if they think Marcus Allen is someone who can kind of step up and play a little bit more in specials, contribute a little bit more as a backup safety. I think his numbers are done. His days are numbered, rather. And then when it comes to actually, if there was an injury, I think depending on the strong or free position, you might see Cam Sutton or Mike Hilton slotting back there before any of these backup guys, or they could bring in a veteran free agent, because there is still a long list of guys that are safeties and just haven't been signed. It's really strange. Guys like Tony Jefferson, former Baltimore Ravens safety, Rashad Jones, former defensive pairing with Minkah Fitzpatrick in Miami, still both available. And I think are guys that will definitely be claimed at some point, but that's probably going to happen more likely after an injury at some spot as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens at the inside linebacker and safety depth spots. Of course, there is even talk that Terrell Edmunds can move up and play some linebacker in those passing situations. But if Ulysses Gilbert can step in and be as good as some of us are kind of hoping him to be, then Terrell Edmunds wouldn't even necessarily have to do that, and kind of continues to help the depth at both sides, one helping the other. Moving on to our next talking point here is one Mr. Bud Dupree. Bud is a very interesting case this year because, of course, he totally broke out a year ago. If it wasn't for his 11.5 sacks, say if he put up another 5-sack season, I guarantee you Steelers fans would be calling this guy a bust. And I don't know if he necessarily gets that franchise tag designation that he did get this past offseason. If Bud Dupree looks more like 2018, 17, 16, 15 Bud Dupree, the Steelers might be more inclined to start playing some other guys ahead of him before the season even ends. But if he continues to progress If he has a better season than he did a year ago, then whoa, mama, watch out. The Steelers defense is going to be extremely, extremely good. It already is, but getting a Bud Dupree putting up TJ Watt like numbers, that only does wonders to this team. We got a few people in the live chat here mentioning how many sacks out of Bud Dupree. Of course, Ezra Nehemiah saying he'll have 13 sacks this year. Mark Tobin saying 10.5. I'm curious, each and every one of you listening right now, how many sacks do you think we're going to get out of Bud Dupree in 2020? George Tesson jumping in with 16, which would be insane because that would tie the record for sacks in a season that James Harrison currently holds from 2008. I am saying that's going to fall this year. I don't think Bud gets there. I think TJ Watt is the guy to do it, and I think this might be his 84 Marino year when he might pop off for 17.5, 18 sacks. But and I mean that, and Dan Marino having his best season, not being a pass rusher. So before everyone jumps on me in the live chat, I'm just throwing that out there. But for Bud Dupree to get 16 sacks, I'm telling you, that would probably mean a whole bunch of names probably got injured, because these guys are going to take sacks away from one another because they're going to be beating each other, the quarterback. And I think I think it's one of those things that might affect some guys' pay, because they might be the second guy in, but they would have gotten the sack if Cam Hayward wasn't there already, if Stephon Tuitt wasn't there already, if Watt wasn't there, if Dupree wasn't there, if Devin Bush wasn't there. Because these guys are going to rack up the numbers. That front four has potential to have 4 guys go over 10 double-digit sacks, which is absolutely insane. And if Bud Dupree can continue on his development that he did a year ago, whoa, this team is going to be really, really, really hard to play against. Not only do they have a great secondary, their pass rush is swarming. The faster they get to the quarterback, I think the more it elongates Joe Hayden's career. The older he gets, the more he kind of slows down a little bit. The less he has to kind of stick with the guy for 3.5 seconds, 5 seconds down the field, because the Steelers pass rush is in the lap of the quarterback that quickly. It really just helps every other aspect of this game. So if Bud Dupree can be as good as he was a year ago, then the Steelers are going to be just all right. If he wasn't, then if he regresses a bit, he might get another deal in Pittsburgh. But if he continues on his path as well, he could move on to greener pastures, to an organization that has a few more dollars in that salary cap that he is desperately looking for. Next thing I want to touch on here, outside of the pass rush, outside of the offense, one of the biggest factors in the game is our special teams. It's a third of the game. And namely our kicking and punting. Whether or not we think it's a big deal, it is. We saw what happened in 2018 when whatever happened to Chris Boswell completely shot his confidence, and the team struggled and honestly missed the playoffs because of how poorly he was at kicking extra points and the regular field goal. He bounced back a year ago, and the Steelers, if they had Ben Roethlisberger, they were a playoff team. In 2018, if Chris Boswell looked like 2017 Chris Boswell, the Steelers are making the playoffs, and the Ravens aren't sitting here as 2-time defending AFC North champions at this moment. So if that is the case, if we can get consistency out of Boz again, this team is going to be completely fine. But if your kicker starts missing field goals and the Steelers got to go for 2 more, if they start passing up shorter 50 yarders, like 50, 51 yarders, because they're worried about him having the leg to even get there, like they were in 2018, then this team's going to struggle even more. And then the thing that didn't quite bounce back was the punting game a year ago, and Jordan Berry, who is in a very interesting spot right now, because the Steelers still haven't cut Corliss Waitman, who's the other punter on this team. When you think about that right now, the Steelers have had to cut, I think they've made 14 cuts since the original 90 at the start of training camp, because they had the 90 down to 80 because of the COVID cuts. Guys coming back from the COVID reserve list forced other guys getting cut. The signing of Ray McLeod that became official today cut Saeed Blacknall. Of course, they're both wide receivers, but you could have held on to both of those guys if you cut one of your 2 punters. The Steelers holding on to 2 punters here speaks volumes, because I think Jordan Berry might potentially be on his last legs in Pittsburgh. I don't even know if he's going to make it out of this camp. Why in the world would they keep an undrafted punter when you have to cut guys? They're moving out wide receivers, they're moving out corners, they're shuffling their roster a little bit, trying to find some diamonds in the rough here, but they're keeping a punter instead of some of these other guys, which screams out to me that there's something going on there. Jordan Berry struggled. His worst season was 2018 by far. I don't know what happened. Something was in the Kool-Aid for the kickers that year, and they both regressed like crazy. A year ago, he started off fine, but trailed off as the season went. He was sporadic with his kicks, spraying them all over the field, shanking them, kicking out of bounds. It's a huge factor in this game. And you look at how the Ravens built their team, or built their special teams. They have a kicker that's damn near automatic and can kick 70-yarders if they really needed him to, in Justin Tucker. And then their punter is one of the best in the game as well. I hate to compare us to them, but that's one of the things that I think is one of the game points of the game that people don't really realize enough of how important it really is. Because the fact of the matter is, they're not. If they're not producing, then the Steelers aren't winning. If you're not getting that guaranteed point, then good luck. If you're shanking the ball for 4 yards on your side of the 50, and the opposition is starting their drives consistently on your 30, 40 yard line, they're going to be putting up points over and over and over again. But if you're booting the ball down their 20-yard line, if you're coffin cornering it, and they got to go 90 yards, I'm telling you, teams aren't going to score. They're not going to be averaging 28 points against this defense. It's too good. Teams will not have 4 90-yard drives a game against this defense. It's that good. The only way I think this team could be putting up points like that is if there's a ton of turnovers, which I suppose is always possible, or if the punting game is subpar. And the ball's just getting placed all over the field, and long returns are allowed because guys have outrun the ball because the punter couldn't get it 40 to 50 yards downfield. So this is going to be really interesting, especially this punting situation, to see where that winds up. I would have loved to see a punting competition. I know it sounds weird, love to see a punting competition, but how it probably would have worked was they probably go punt for punt. I don't think they go first half Barry, second half Waitman. I think they go punt 1, it's you, punt 2, it's you, and back and forth until the end of camp, and then they cut whoever struggles the most. Waitman in 2018 had his best season in college when he's averaging over 45 yards per punt. That's kind of where Barry was a year ago, but if Waitman can do that, but with a little more consistency, he can totally win that punting job. So it's possible, but it is one of the biggest factors, especially one of the factors that I don't think enough of us really are talking about, because it's a kicking game, and you know what? It's not the sexy thing to talk about, but if the Steelers struggle in this aspect of the game, it's something that could hold them back when they're chasing a 14-win Ravens team a year ago. And they are gunning for this AFC North title, and they need everything humming, everything, all the gears meshing, everything just working perfectly for them to do that, because they're going up against the league MVP who's going to be putting up points with an improved defense. So if that's who they're chasing, the Steelers are going to need every single aspect of the game just absolutely going in their favor. Otherwise, it could be a little bit of an issue when it comes to trying to reclaim the AFC North. One more thing that I want to touch on before we wrap up here as one of the big factors. Right now, the Steelers in 2019 didn't have that trap game loss that they typically do. But that's mostly because they were the team that was kind of the trap game for everybody else, because they're missing their starting quarterback. And for a chunk of the year, we're playing their 4th string quarterback as their starter. So the Steelers were kind of the trap team a year ago in some senses. But with a healthy Ben Roethlisberger and in the Mike Tomlin era, really over the course of my entire life, it seems like every year the Steelers struggle against 1 or 2 teams that they absolutely have no business struggling against. And it potentially cost them a higher ranking in the playoffs, potentially a bye week, potentially winning the AFC North. It happened in 2018, happened in 2017 when the Steelers went 13-3. I believe their 3 losses that year, the Raiders, who was their trap game, they should have won that if they did. First place in the division, they're not playing Jacksonville. When they lose to Jacksonville and that unfortunate Patriots Jesse James caught at play. But again, a trap game costs them something that probably ends up in a playoff berth at the very, very least. But it's going to be one of those things the Steelers absolutely need to avoid. Obviously, I think the biggest trap game this season is the second game against the Bengals. I believe it's week 10. Oh, man. What makes it a little bit different here is that they are a divisional foe. So they are going to have to play them multiple times. And the divisional games, you don't necessarily take an opponent lightly, but I suppose it's definitely a possibility. So in 2020, the Steelers are probably, if they want to win the AFC North, at the very least need 12 wins. They have the second easiest schedule in football, so it's definitely possible, but they're going to have to win at least one of those games against the Ravens. And if they can win 2, then 12 games is probably enough to win the AFC North. If they lose one of those games, or potentially both of those games to the Ravens, then they're going to have to win a whole lot more of their other games. And that includes those trap games. So what's really going to happen here is if they lose that trap game to a Cleveland or to a Denver, as some are pointing out, or really the Giants, who in week 1 could be a potential trap game, but I wouldn't classify it as such because this team has got a ton to prove. Ben Roethlisberger's health is going to be the first thing anyone talks about when they talk about that week 1 matchup. So there's going to be some those potentially trap games, especially if teams get hit by the injury bug, or if there's a game when they're playing a team that has, say, their starting quarterback ends up on the COVID list and they still play the game. That instantly becomes a trap game. And especially if it's one of those teams that have a great quarterback, like when they go into Baltimore, say if Lamar Jackson ends up on that reserve list, all of a sudden the Steelers are thinking, oh, we got a cakewalk again. We're playing RG3, but we saw what happened a year ago. The Steelers didn't even, I know they wouldn't have made the playoffs regardless of beating the Ravens that final week, but they didn't even give themselves that opportunity because they completely choked it away. It's going to be one of the bigger factors year in, year out, is winning the games they're supposed to win. That's one of the things the New England Patriots, why they've had such a dominant run of terror. I know they've had a weaker division, but they take care of business. They beat up on the Bills. They beat up on the Dolphins. They beat up on the Jets. They go 6-0 in their division. They beat the teams they're supposed to beat. And you know what? That's exactly what the Steelers are going to need to do. I know there's an expanded playoff, so I think this team's going to be a playoff team no matter what. But if they want to knock off Baltimore and make the playoffs run through Pittsburgh, then they're going to need to win those games that they're supposed to win. So I think that pretty much wraps it up here today. There's a ton of factors, of course. The biggest one we really didn't touch too much on, but that Ben Roethlisberger elbow. Everyone already knows what's going on there. If Big Ben's good, then this team, look out. It's a potential Super Bowl team. Again, thanks for listening to parts 1 and 2 of the biggest X factors in this 2020 season. I appreciate each and every one of you sitting here catching the show with me. And if you're listening on our podcast platform, make sure to like the show and share a comment. Make sure to rate us 5 stars. Give us a like if you're listening on YouTube, and subscribe. Thanks again for sitting along with me, guys. And again, one last time before I get out here, it is Follow Friday, so make sure you're following our man today, Mr. Dave Schofield, who is our Follow Friday of the day. Before we send it out here, Snowman throws $5 in the tip jar. He said, let us all wish Ron Rivera good luck as he's battling cancer. Yes, I couldn't agree more, Snowman. Ron Rivera, we here at BTSC, and I'm sure the Steelers organization, the NFL family is wishing you well. So, Ron Rivera, you're going to kick cancer's rear end, and I'm hopeful and excited to see you on the season on the sidelines this season for Washington. As I sign out here, guys, again, thank you for hanging out with me. I'm Michael Beck, Deputy Editor behind SteelCurtain.com. And if you haven't already, make sure to tune into part 1. Again, I'm Michael Beck. Make sure you're checking out to BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers. Have a great night, guys, and enjoy your week.